Great. All right. Well, greetings from Bermuda. I am delighted today to be moderating this panel titled How to Get What You Want with three female trailblazers right here from Bermuda. My name, firstly, is Risa Hunter, and I'm the Executive Director of Masterworks Museum of Bermuda Art. And today, our three panelists, Pamela Barit Nolan, Leah Dean, and Susan Pateras, will be sharing personal stories of their career journeys, including learning how to ask for what you want, negotiation, and goal setting. So I'll now quickly turn it over to the panel to introduce themselves. So Susan, why don't you kick off?
Happy to. Good morning, everyone, or good evening, depending on where you're joining us from. Super excited to be here. Happy to be in company of these amazing women. I'm currently, a little bit about my background, I'm currently Deputy Chair of the Bermuda Business Development Agency. My career has been 25 years in the insurance and reinsurance industry. Formerly Chief Operating Officer of a reinsurance company, and I've had the privilege of being on the ground floor of two startups. So, you know, my background and my work certainly took me around the world. And one thing I was able to learn and apply is realizing that women across the world really have the same issues, the same dreams, the same desires, but are all struggling a bit in silence. And so I'm really excited today to be with the circle of women and hopefully share some of my knowledge. And the reason why I also founded The Art of You, which is a women's platform to discuss topics just like this. So thank you, Risa.
Thank you. All right. Next.
Hey, everybody, and good morning, good evening, wherever you are. I am really excited to be here. My name is Leah Dean. I am the founder and CEO of Conduit International, which is a women's leadership and personal and professional development company. And in terms of my career, I spent over 20 years in the corporate world, worked my way into various leadership and executive positions, was able to work on a board. So I'm really excited. I also founded a women's conference and event series called Design for Impact. So I'm excited today to be with Pam, Risa, and Susan to just talk about how to get what you want. I think it's a topic that women, or a conversation rather, that women need to have. So thank you for having me, Risa.
Great. Well, thank you, Leah. And Pamela. I think she might be frozen. Pamela, can you hear us? Okay. All right. So I will kick off the first question, and then we'll circle back to Pamela when she has better connection. So let's begin by examining the theme of this panel, how to get what you want. So really, to launch this discussion, let's start with thinking about how do you begin to even develop your big dreams? How do you know what you want? And what kind of advice and support do you look for to better understand what you want out of life? So Susan, we'll kick off with you.
Yeah, happy to start that one. I mean, for women who already have big dreams, big ideas, and big goals, that's really the first step. And so for some of us, obviously, my personal story, not seeing representation matters. And I always talk about that. So I didn't grow up where I saw women in leadership positions, women with titles. And so the journey, I always say, is different for lots of people, right? And we're all on this journey in different stages. But one thing I know to be true is it's not about fixing something in us. It's really just about sharing and opening our eyes and realizing that nothing in life is fixed. That, it's kind of this secret unknown, which really speaks to negotiation and how to ask, but just seeing the world and seeing the limitless, no pun intended, opportunities that exist. And I think, if you've already started on that journey and you have the big dream, you really are ahead. And then it really is about how do you put a path and a process in place to take the goals that you have, the skills that you have, and distill it down to what is also extremely important, a circle around you to support you in elevating that. There's a common, phrase people always use, you're the average of the 5 people that you spend the most time with. And I believe that to be true. And I also believe that even in my own story, I thought I dreamed pretty big coming from where I came from. I was shooting for something and had a vision, and it was always very clear, and I'm thankful for that. But it was, beyond anything around me, beyond any of the examples around me. And what I learned to be true, even at 40, being able to retire at 45, hit all my goals, travel to all the countries I want, ascend to the C-suite, be on boards, I realized maybe my dream wasn't big enough. So I guess I share that to say the journey never ends. And so, getting your dream and understanding your why, but then having the process in place and the circle to do that is the fundamentals.
Mm-hmm. Great. Thank you, Susan. And Leah, what would you add to that?
I think for me, kind of understanding what you want in life, for me, it's always started with really understanding who you are. I think our story starts with what's inside of us. I always try to live a very purpose-led life. And for me, purpose is the reason why I exist. So if purpose is the reason why I exist, and there must be some things that are already inside of me. So I always say, understand your gifts. Your gifts are things like the experiences that you bring to the table, your strengths, your talents, the way that you think, your passions. I grew up in a household where we didn't have a lot of financial resources. So the only thing that my parents taught us is get to know who you are and then leverage the heck out of it, because that's the only thing that you have. So for me, figuring out where to start, sometimes the easiest place has been really to look at both what I'm already bringing to the table and what I'd like to add to the table. And for me, that's usually where I start.
That's great. Thank you, Leah. And Pamela, are you back?
That's so.
Nope, I don't think so. Okay.
I'm solving this issue. Bear with me a second, please.
Okay, no worries. Okay, so we'll keep going then. Drilling down then and looking at, taking, these goals, these dreams that you have, once defined, how do you really structure and formulate those goals to achieve them? Leah, I don't know if you want to add on from what you just mentioned.
Sure. So one of the beliefs that I have, one of the tenets that I hold, is this idea that we should know our pilot and pilot our lives. So I'm a spiritual person, so I kind of know what anchors me. But then this idea of piloting your life, well, a pilot is usually the person who directs, but it's also an experiment. Sometimes we have these big plans, and we should plan, but we jump in kind of both feet first, when actually I've learned that if you take kind of little tiny steps, it tells you if it's something you love, and it builds your confidence along the way. And I think I learned that kind of concept from my dad. I tell everybody he has had more careers than anyone that I know in the entire world. He has been a mechanic. He has worked in insurance. He has driven boats and submarines and planes, and the list is long, but it's because he kind of knew what he was passionate about, and then he was willing to take risk. And so I've kind of adapted that as part of my own mantra to know your pilot and pilot your life, and take the experiment and just do the experiments. When we take the risk, then that's really when we get to grow. So have the plan and take the risk.
Yeah, and I think for so many females, I know we talked about this in our pre-discussion, struggle with risk-taking, and that there's a whole topic around that we don't have time for today. But I love what you're saying there, because I think sometimes we feel like we have to have everything so perfect and so right before we jump in. So piloting and risk-taking, experimenting, I think that's great. And Susan, do you have anything to add to that?
I would, other than, I certainly deeply resonate with everything that Leah said, but, just to share an example, perhaps to paint the picture. There's so many women, whether I'm coaching them or mentoring them formally or informally at this stage, and they're saying, I really want this job, or I'm thinking about this career path, or I'm thinking about launching this business. And so, I've went and I've gotten my master's, or I'm looking at securing this certification, and I'm looking at, and I always stop them and say, higher level education, fully commit to, believe in, no one can take that from you. That is an investment in yourself. But I always stop them and say, okay, but why, right? Why is it that you feel that you need these credentials, or you need this learning to get you started. To Leah's point around sometimes proofs of concept and just having a, you know, corporate speak, agile methodology, which means just jump sometimes. And whether you have a safety net or not, you know, take the risk, because when you know, kind of work through their whys, it really is about, you know, a belief that they're not ready. Mm-hmm. And that they need these external factors or credentials to get them ready. In other industries, you know that there's no perfect set of data. There's no perfect set of information. Sometimes you just have what you have. You need to believe that it is enough to make a decision, and you test it and you move forward. And you then you give yourself license and grace to pivot and adjust. And along the way, I don't believe in failure. I believe you learn something every time.
Yeah, I think that, you know, failure and discomfort are just the necessary steps that lead us closer to who we're going to become. So we have to take those risks. We have to fail forward, and we shouldn't be afraid of failure. I think the only thing we should be afraid of is if we look back on our lives and we say, I wish I would have tried. So we do the pilot.
Yes, exactly. No, that's great. And Pamela, are you back now? Can you hear us?
I can hear you. I'm sorry, I'm a bit flustered, so I'm not really sure where you're at.
That's okay. Don't worry. We just did we went through the first two questions, looking at kind of the high level picture of how do you figure out what you want, what you really care about, and then how do you really think about setting goals. So Pamela, do you want to just quickly do a brief introduction to the group?
Sure. Again, my apologies for the technology challenges this morning, but I am a coach and consultant. I work with clients around the world. I heard Leah talking about her dad having lots of careers. I've done that too. So I've spent time in the financial services sector, in the nonprofit sector, and finally landing in the coaching and consulting sector about 9 years ago.
Great. Well, thank you. So Pamela, before we move on to question 3, I was just kind of wondering if you wanted to add anything. I know you obviously couldn't hear what Leah and Susan had to say, but anything in particular about your experience about figuring out what really you want to do, what your why is, and then setting goals and objectives around that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Risa. I mean, I think, you know, first of all, I love the way you had asked the first question around, you know, how do you get to taking action on your dream? And first is to celebrate that we have dreams, and then begin to formulate that. I actually use a framework with my clients called Ikigai, which people can Google. And Ikigai is about figuring out what it is that you love and you're passionate about, and then considering what the world needs and whether you then can get paid for that, of course, and ensuring that you're good at it. So always looking for ways to improve the skill and the passion that you're delivering to the world.
That's great. Thank you. So moving on here, Susan, I know in our pre-discussion, we talked a little bit about this question, so I'd like for you to kick this off. But the question is, how can you position yourself to get what you want without being too salesy or greedy or coming across as manipulative? And that's something, including myself, once again, a lot of females really struggle with trying to figure out what that balance is. So do you have any thoughts around that?
I have a ton, because those words just strike a nerve with me, because again, I feel like just the nature of the question and the wording, you know, would we ask men the same thing, right? Would we apply that same lens to men? Would they be seen as, you know, great self-promoters? Would they be seen as taking the risk, being forthright about their career, where those labels just already put women in a negative place? And so I take exception with all of that, and saying that to say that, you know, at this stage, and all the stats show it, you know, women make up 50% of the workforce. Women have been adversely impacted by the pandemic. And at the same time, and I've been on a tear about this since March with Equal Pay Day in the United States, women on average, white women, you know, make 81 cents on the dollar to men. Black women and Latinos are 63 cents and 50 cents. And so if you extrapolate, so first let that sink in, but then if you extrapolate that into the years that women have to work simply to find pay parity, and that's not even including the investment years, all the opportunities that money doesn't afford you, this mental stability, the anxiety, et cetera, knowing those stats and knowing how far we come and knowing what our contributions are and all the stats that also show companies with boards who have significant amount of diversity and women representation outperform. I mean, that's statistically proven. That's not my opinion, because women look at risk differently. And so the balance of diversity of thought matters. And so, the most important step in any negotiation is simply deciding to negotiate. I say that all the time, right? It is deciding to take that risk, regardless of the labels that you put on yourself, regardless of the labels that the person across the desk, if you will, or on the other end of the phone, you may think they feel about you. It goes back to, I think what Pamela Lee and you have said, what's your why, right? What is it that you're waking up every day to either fight for, that you have a cause around, or that you want for your life? And I think if you specifically, drill down on that, then the labels don't matter. And that's easier said than done. But I believe, if you just start the process, the first time is only the first time. And so once you've done something hard the first time and uncomfortable, not to say that you don't have anxiety showing up to do it again, but it's never the first time, right? You've already done it, you've tried it, you can adjust. And yes, there's frameworks and formulas because everyone's different and their voices are different in how you ask. But really, I think overcoming that mindset or that belief that asking, is I should be grateful. I don't want to be seen as pushy or bossy. I just try to tell women, you got to pack those away. And those are old labels and old playbooks. And you've got to, really think about your long-term earning potential, if that's what fires you up, your legacy around the children that come behind you or other women, if that's what fires you up, or an objective you're trying to hit. So whatever that fire is, use that to get you to move and take the risk, regardless of what those labels are. Sorry, that was a long answer.
No, that's great. That's great. And kind of leading into, oh yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, if I could just add to that really quickly, Risa,
Yeah.
I agree with everything that Susan just said, but I also think sometimes when you're entering into negotiation, you have to figure out what is going to get us to yes. What do I need to do? What's important to the other person, so that I can get to a place where I can achieve a yes. A lot of times in negotiation, we think that it's a negative thing and it needs to be this drag out fight. But if you've done the work, if you have the expertise, if you have the experience, then think about how that's going to add value to the organization or the situation, and what are the words and the conversations that we need to have in order to get us both to a yes. So that's just something that I use when I think about negotiation.
And I guess I would tag on to that, Leah, and just I spend a lot of time in somatics, and knowing that in any negotiation that our bodies can actually really be an element that support us. And so being really grounded, and as you're in a negotiation, if you feel that you're at all, not getting to where you want, noticing that your body doesn't collapse in any way, but really leaning into the ongoing conversation, your confidence, and sticking with the plan as you move through that negotiation.
Yeah, that's great. And I think, there are steps that we can think about before going into a negotiation. And something that I love that you're touching on, Pamela, is that you really need to think and be prepared beforehand and really think about body language and, how you're going to approach the conversation. Susan, do you have any personal rituals or practices that help you prepare for an important negotiation?
That's another great question. Again, it's different for everyone, but I think some of the fundamentals are probably true across the board. And just recently, because this topic has been since Equal Pay Day really relevant, I created a pre-negotiation, just self-inventory checklist to walk people through my process. And it starts with the mindset, right? The belief that nothing is fixed, right? That you can influence any situation. And that's been eye-opening. We take to Clubhouse every Thursday to have chats, and just hearing women say, I didn't realize I could negotiate with a bank. I didn't realize I could negotiate with a hotel or Airbnbs. Just the revelation and the trusting that nothing is fixed. And so there's some steps I go through there, knowing your facts. I think Leah and Pamela both talked about that. How many women have their own bio? And that's not for an external, to put on a website, but really, could you give your elevator speech? Do you know your bio? Do you know your accomplishments that you've helped the other party, achieve their goals? And so, and, on the back end of that, how do you own your strengths? Do you know what they are? Can you articulate them? Can you tie them then to your value? And then how do you utilize your circle? Because some of it is, market research. If you're negotiating a contract with a vendor, if you have your own business, if it is, a new job or a job you're trying to influence your current wage or promotion, right? So there's an element of market research as well. And so there's a deep network, especially with women and certainly men who sit across the table and want to help. But this idea that we don't ask because we feel that we need to have all the information, or we feel that some of these conversations are just taboo because of the cultures we come from. Those are some of the things that, I chart down, break through, have kind of that 5-step plan in front of me, and help women, walk through it as well.
Great. And one of the things, sorry, I'm jumping here, but there was a question I wanted to ask before, because I know that Leah has done a lot of work around, building your tribe and what it means to have a group of people around you, which you touched on briefly, Leah. But I was just wondering if you wanted to build that out a bit, because I think that concept can really help females who feel like they don't have enough experience in a given industry or profession, and that building the people around you can actually prop you up. So I didn't know if you had any thoughts around that.
Oh, you just asked me for my favorite subject. I would just say to women, you will never have all of the experience that you need to be able to do the thing that you want to do. There's always more to learn. And so one of the things that I say, if you want to take that leap, if you want to take that next step, assemble your tribe. In my experience, it doesn't matter how hard I've worked, how qualified I was. Usually it's my relationships that will give me that advantage. It's the person that's going to invite you into the room, the other person who is going to give you the role. So we don't live life alone. We don't do life alone. And I find as women, we're often so driven that we're making, and we've talked about it, investing in those talents and those passions and those skills that we have our head down. And sometimes we need to take our head up and actually say, who are the people around me that can support me and help me to get to where I need to go? And I think back to my career, whether it was my first job and my first foray into management, someone actually I had to have a relationship, and then we built on that relationship, and then they trusted, and then they moved me into the role. But it was because I took the time to cultivate, network, and build those skills at the same time. And then when I think about my journey of entrepreneurship, I went from a big corporate organization managing 4 departments and the entire organization to support me to this entrepreneurship role where I have my own company, and now I'm responsible for all of the functions. I'm not an expert in finance and IT and all of those things, but I can build a tribe of people around me, both paid and unpaid, who will help to accelerate. I call it the tribe advantage, and I talk about it in my work. They will help me to accelerate and achieve things at a much faster pace than I could if I was on my own. And so, I was coaching a woman a couple weeks ago, and she said to me, because I asked her, I said, do you have a tribe? And she said, not really. I'm in this role. They moved me into this role. I feel like if I reach out and ask for help, it will be embarrassing because I should know the answers because I'm in the role. And so I just want everybody to know we never have all the answers. I've never had all the answers for any job that I've ever had, but it's just a willingness to take the risk, but then also add people around me who can make me better.
That's
It's
great.
not really drive.
I love that.
Same to that,
Yes.
again, because a specific story, and I love that, Leah. And again, what I think, women unduly put on themselves are, you know, all this conditioning and belief around perfection. And, you know, we've talked about the skills that you need to have. And I have found time and time again when women actually get to the table, you know, excel, maybe have a peek behind the curtain, they literally will come, you know, come to each other with your tribe and say, wow, he didn't have all the answers either. Like I'm sitting in a room of, you know, board directors, C-suite, tech executives, and they don't know the answer either. And so, you know, it's this revelation to say, no one expects you to, right? If you're there for a reason, and on the job learning is a real thing, right? How many women apply for jobs when they haven't been able to tick every single box in the job description? Most women won't. They'll say, oh, well, there's something here that I don't have. There, you know, I'm missing a particular skill or qualification. Men, 9 times out of 10, will go ahead and apply, even if they have 2 or 3 of the 10. And so again, it's this belief that you have to have all the answers, and in actuality you don't. Really asking the most thoughtful questions is why people want you at the table.
Yes, I agree with that, Susan. And I think that that nicely ties back into what we started with at the very beginning when we were talking about piloting and risk taking, and what that means to take on and feel confident in risk taking, and feeling confident that you don't have all the answers, but that you're there and you're participating and you're learning and growing as part of that journey. So in the interest of time, we have to wrap up. So I think it would be great to have each one of you share one piece of advice that you would give to the next generation of female leaders to get what they want. What's the lasting comment that you'd like to leave the audience with? So I'll start with Pamela.
Great, thank you, Risa. I would say be bold, take risks, and make sure to have fun.
I like that. Have fun along the way, yes. Susan, any thoughts?
I would say, you know, get to a point where you really know what you want. There is homework involved in that, and that changes over a lifetime. Be brave, take risk, ask for it. If you need help, there's, you know, skills, there's people like on this panel who will help you do that work. Know your worth, be able to articulate it, believe outcomes aren't fixed in every facet of your life, and lean on your circle.
Mm-hmm. And Leah, last but not least.
I love that. My advice is always know your why. I think our why can be the anchor for us. If I think back over the course of my life and my career, it's knowing my why that has helped me figure out what's the right steps. So maybe you're, you know, just about to go to college and you don't have enough money. Your why is going to help you put in the work to get the education and to win the scholarship so that you can go where you want to go. Or maybe you're kind of at mid-career and you have a family, and as Susan was saying earlier, you want to take care of them, you want to travel. You know, your why is going to help you make sure that you're prepared for the role. It's going to help you take the risk to go in and ask for the role, and it's going to help you take the risk to ask for the money. Knowing your why. And then maybe if you're at a different phase in your career and you are ready for more balance, you want to pursue some passion, your why is going to help you know when's the right time to walk away. So I say always know your why, listen to it, follow it, and I believe at the end of the day, that's the way that we will always get what we want, when we know our why.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Pamela, Susan, and Leah. That was super. I mean, I know that I took away a lot of key points, you know, just leaving on that notion that, you know, understanding who you are, your why, and what it means to implement action, risk-taking, building confidence in negotiations. I mean, hopefully our audience have left today with at least one action item that they can take away with them into their career or even in their personal space. So I think that we'll wrap up with looking at if there are any questions from the group. Let me see if we've got any questions that have come through. I don't see any yet, but feel free to put in the chat box.
Risa, sorry, in the Q&A,
Okay.
There are a couple of questions.
Oh, okay, great. That's just my technology, a lack of technology skills. Okay, so one of the questions that came up, how do you work on removing the labels? So quote unquote, I'm bossy, etc. What steps would you take?
So I'll start. I think this is an interesting one. I think I talk a lot about in my work self-awareness. And so there is, in order to get what you want, there is an amount of push that's required. You know, you have to go in, you have to ask the questions. Sometimes you have to tell folks what to do. I think the question is, it's just the how. So when I talk about, when I work with leaders, I work with folks on things like performance and development. It's both the what and the how. So I have to tell my team what to do. I have to give instructions. I have to be clear. Sometimes I have to push people to do the things that they don't want to do. The question is, how do I do it? So if I want to remove a label, I can always just examine how I'm doing what I need to get done. And sometimes it's a matter of self-reflecting. Other times you can get a coach. Sometimes you can ask a friend, hey, what's your perception of how I'm showing up? Because this is what I want to achieve. So I would say, Lanisha, just remember it's the what and it's the how. And we can always work on shifting our self-awareness and our how a little bit.
That's great.
Yeah, I'm
Susan,
happy to
Pamela,
add-
anything you'd like to add to that?
I'd love to add on to that. I do think there's an element of just, again, leaning on your why and self-realization, knowing that, yes, you've got to do the hard work. Yes, you have to build bridges, acceptance of, yeah, no, not everyone's going to like you or your style, but that's not going to stop you anyway. And so, you know, that is, you know, asking yourself what's standing in your way. Is it anxiety? Is it fear? Is it the gratitude? Is it the need to feel liked? You know, and so not everyone is comfortable in a place of being a trailblazer, but I will say most women that I know that have gotten to the top are labeled incorrectly, but for the similar reasons, right? They've had to be bold, they've had to stand their ground. Silence sometimes is golden too. And so, you know, doing things that make you uncomfortable, but knowing that you can stand on your own too, regardless of conjecture, regardless of potential labels. And then going back to getting the feedback, right? Because perfect practice makes perfect. And so knowing that, you know, when you're getting feedback, you're also extending yourself, being vulnerable and inviting people in to help make you better. And then the other thing I think women can do, and I'm a big proponent of this, is amplify each other, right? Say someone else's name when they're not in the room, right? Leah is amazing, and I really think you should invite her here to do this. Pamela's done XYZ work, and so why isn't she at the table? Or when the labels come up, wow, Susan said that, and that was really blunt. You know, women, and again, not everyone's shoulders are this broad yet, but, you know, women can be great supporters and say, oh, but listen, if John said that, would you have taken it that same way? And just pressing pause on a situation to have people reflect on the fact that someone's delivery may be, because they're a woman, harshly criticized versus a man.
And I guess I would pick up on Susan's a little bit about being curious about where the label's coming from, and being bold enough to go and have the conversation. I'm a big believer when you are working on a specific goal, if it's in a corporate environment, to ensure that you've got all the voices in the room so you can co-create a solution. And as the leader, you do need to be bold and take a step out front, but critically listening to all the voices in the room and ensuring that they're included. You might not take all the ideas, but you know, allowing those voices to be heard and those solutions to be brought forward can be a place where perhaps the labels fall away. And one of the best speakers I heard at a coaching conference one time said, as a leader, if you are able to admit that you don't know what you don't know, you'll have greater success. So I think being a little bit vulnerable and curious about perhaps where some of those labels are coming from, and then working to shift those perspectives will lead to better success.
Yes, thank you. And I'm just looking at the questions here. And the second one, I think we touched on it quite a bit in terms of personal rituals and practices to prepare for an important negotiation. So I'm going to jump to Daria's.
Actually, Risa, could I just add one thing there that
Sure.
I wasn't able to? So, one of the things, the sort of description for this session talked about negotiating for salary. And as a coach, one of the things that I work with some of my clients on is actually, and I know Leah and Susan touched on this, but being confident of what that number is, but then actually saying it to, if you're working with me as a coach, saying the number to me, I want a salary of $200,000 or $100,000 or whatever it is, and actually saying it to yourself, saying it perhaps to your partner, because sometimes we have anxiety about actually saying the number. So that's always one thing that I work on my clients with. Just speak it, say what you need.
Yes. So often we have the idea in our head and we just don't verbalize it. So, no one will ever understand you unless you actually, share exactly what you want. So going on to Daria's question, because I think this is a really good one. She's asking, is it necessary to have one why? I've heard that for some personality types, multiple paths are needed. And if so, when do you have to draw a line, as in how many whys? And I think this applies when you're thinking about multi-hyphenate careers and people that go in different directions or that shift their why over their lifetime. So does anybody have any thoughts about that?
My thoughts are, because we are forever growing and changing and moving into different circumstances and different situations, in the same way that we're changing, our why has to change. So as I just shared, my why for doing things when I was in my teens and 20s is very different from the why that I use now. And so that's why I would just say, at any given moment in any given situation, if you're going to make a decision, it's actually asking, what's my why for making this decision? Am I staying in this role because it feeds me and it excites me? Or am I staying in this role because I am nervous about moving away? Or am I staying in this role because my family needs me to be here? And so for each situation in our lives, there's typically a why. I think, and even when it comes to what I was talking about at the beginning, which is a little bit different from negotiation and working through situations, the why around why we exist, sometimes that shifts as well as we kind of grow and add to our arsenal of things that we're capable of. So I don't think there's any absolutes. The whys grow as we grow. They grow and change as we grow.
And if I could pick up on Leah, I agree that our why can shift and change, but I've found anyways in sort of taking those pauses to reflect, my purpose stays pretty consistent. So maybe the why in different circumstances, why I was in financial services for 20 years or why I led a nonprofit for 10 years might change a little bit. But when I did finally pause and reflect, after those 2 chapters of my life, what was it? What was my purpose in those 2 spaces? It was about supporting and helping mainly women grow and develop. So as I looked at my next chapter, what my next why was going to be, taking that sort of deep calling, that deep inner purpose of supporting and encouraging women was enabled me to move into being a coach. Different times, different scenarios, and yes, different needs during those chapters. But my core purpose when I stopped to reflect on it was always that supporting and developing women.
Yeah, if I could quickly add, that resonates with me so much as well. My overarching why was always freedom, right? I wanted to have freedom. I wanted to be able to make my own choices, not be beholden to, family history. And so that always drove me. And so I think to Leah's point, once I then got there, whatever that freedom looked like for me, now it's still freedom, but it is teaching other women and sharing all of those lessons so that women can either get there quicker because they don't have to, take the hard road maybe in some ways that I took, learn from my lessons, or be inspired by the things that did work for me so that they could be free to design the life that they want, not the life that looks like mine. And so it's interesting to reflect on it, to say it has been for me consistent, but roads change and they take you there at different stages in different ways.
Great. Well, thank you, Susan. And thank you, Leah, Pamela. This has been a super panel. As I mentioned before, I have taken away so many bits of information from the three of you, and I hope the audience has as well. Just looking through the chat, it seems like everybody really enjoyed the comments and your insights. So thank you again. And I think that that's all we have time for today.
Thank you, Risa.
Thank you.